My dad got a little bit too entitled, got beaten up and thrown in jail. My parents owned a laundromat for a few years. I posted before how my dad used to, and still does, think that his shit didn't stink, and he can do anything he wants. Well, he learned one day that, unfortunately, that wasn't always the case. Their laundromat was next to a bar, and the bar patrons would always take the spots right in front of the laundromat. Our best guess was because the bar's door was on that side, and open towards the laundromat, so the people were lazy and didn't want to walk around the door. My parents, with permission from the landlord, put up signs for the 3 spots in front of the laundromat saying laundromat parking only, all other vehicles will be ticketed/towed. They figured that would be enough to deter people, but evidently not. People would still park in the spots, so my parents ended up calling by law, and giving people tickets. I think the ticket was like $50, so some people weren't happy about it. That's where my entitled dad comes in. I wasn't actually there for this part, so I only have my parents' and brother's story to go off of, as well as the security footage. But here is what happened. Someone from the bar got a ticket, and came up to the door, which was propped open, to ask my parents why he had gotten a ticket. My mom explained that he had parked in the laundromat parking, and wasn't a laundromat customer. He said something along the lines of "You can't do this." My brother said yes we can, we have the landlord's permission. The guy kicked the door, and got into his car. This is the start of what I can see on the security footage too. My brother, who is a bit entitled himself too, grabbed the bat that we kept under the front desk, and stood at the door. The guy, and his buddy almost left when he came back to the door. He said, "This is ridiculous, I can't afford this ticket." I guess he saw my brother holding the baseball bat, and decided to not push things further, and got back in his car. Things could have ended there, but my entitled dad had to get his last words in. He was in the back fixing a few machines when he heard the guy come back, so he came out. Once the guy left, my dad went up to the door, and said, "Why don't you go cry to your mom, and suck on her titties, you little crybaby," and went to go back to his work. The guy didn't like this, and came inside this time, throwing the items my mom had on her desk across the store. My dad grabbed him, and put him in a headlock. But the guy got loose, and threw my dad into one of the machines. My brother hit the guy in the back with the baseball bat, and he left. This again could have been the end of things. But my dad decided to grab the broom that he kept next to the front door, and chase after the guy with it. Now I love my dad, but he was 55 at the time, and this guy was probably like 25. Everyone thinks their dad is the strongest person, but my dad was way out of shape. So he swung the broom at the guy, and connected, but the guy grabbed the broom, and pulled my dad to the ground with it. My brother had followed my dad out with the bat, but the guy's buddy had gotten out, and stepped in front of him, and they were fighting over the bat. Once my dad was on the ground, the guy basically laid into him, then dragged him across the parking lot. My mom, also 55, was on the phone with 911. According to my dad, because this was off camera, he hit him with the broom again, but the guy just punched him again, and then dragged him back into frame of the security camera. My mom told them she was on the phone with 911, and they said they didn't want to deal with the police. We found out later it was because they were drug dealers, and known to police. So they got back into their car and drove away. My mom and brother were okay, but my dad was cut up, and bleeding. Luckily, after the ambulance checked him over, nothing was broken, it was just minor cuts and scrapes. They gave all their stories, and the security footage to the police, and the police said they were going to look into it so they could press charges against the 2 people from the car. We figured that was the end of things, but boy were we wrong. My brother left for a 2-week vacation, when my parents got a call from the local police asking them to come in and sign a few papers. As soon as they got to the police station, my dad was put in handcuffs. They told him that he was being arrested, and charged with assault with a weapon. Turns out that the police had reviewed the footage, and determined that my dad was the aggressor. That since my dad had antagonized him, and then my brother and him went after him with weapons, they considered the broom a weapon, that both of them were going to be charged. My dad only spent a few hours in a holding cell before being released with a promise to appear in court. And as soon as my brother returned from his trip he had to go to the station, and do the same. I accompanied my parents to court. Since my brother went in 2 weeks after my dad, he had a different court date. We were told to look on a list to see which courtroom we had to go to. We looked at the lists, but my dad's name wasn't on either one. We went up to the front desk, and showed them our paperwork. They were confused, and told us to go to court number 1 and talk to the judge after everyone there had been processed. We sat through hours of people putting their pleas in, and the judge assigning them dates to come back for an actual trial, or where to go to pay their fines. When finally he said, "We have finished the list. Is there anyone here who is not on the list?" So of course my dad went up, and the judge looked over his paperwork. He said, "Come back after lunch, I will have my assistant look into it, and we will let you know the outcome." And with that they broke for lunch. We went back after lunch, and sat for a few more hours, when we finally heard, "Ops Dad, are you here?" It was so weird hearing a judge call his name, like I was actually witnessing him get in trouble or something. My dad went down, and the judge explained. My dad's case had been dropped the day before. We weren't notified because it was so soon to his court date. So we had wasted a day at the courthouse for nothing. And let me tell you, if you have never been to court, it is super boring. You are not allowed to use your phone or anything. My brother's case was also dropped, but he got a phone call before his actual date. All this could have been avoided if my dad had just kept his damn mouth shut. But he just had to get the last words in.